I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we're continuing with section 614, Prometheus Rising, Robert Anton Wilson. We're picking up in the end of Chapter 8, The Moral Socio-Sexual Circuit. Reichians, disciples of Dr. Spock, and the Summerhill School, etc., have called attention with some impatience to the brutality and stupidity of many of our traditional child-rearing methods. These methods are brutal and stupid only if, like the above-mentioned heretics, one regards the goal of child-rearing as the production of a sane, balanced, creative, not created, human being. This has never been the goal of any society in the real world. The traditional child-rearing methods are quite logical, pragmatic, and sound in fulfilling the real purpose of society, which is not to create an ideal person, but to create a semi-robot who mimics the society as closely as possible, both in its rational and irrational aspects, both as a repository of the wisdom of the past, and as a sum total of all the cruelties and stupidities of the past. Very simply, a totally aware, alert, awakened, unbrainwashed person would not fit very well into any of the standard roles society offers. The damaged, robotized products of traditional child-rearing do fit into those slots. That is, there's a neurosociological logic to the illogical. Are traditional schools very much like mini-prisons? Do they stifle imagination, cramp the child physically and mentally, and run on various forms of overt or covert terrorism? Of course, the answer is unambiguously yes, but such schools are necessary to train people for roles in the ordinary office or factory or profession, which are also very much like mini-prisons, stifle imagination, cramp the person physically and mentally, and run on terror, threat of loss of barrio survival tickets in the form of paychecks or tenure. The permissive movement in child-rearing appeared only when it did, and has succeeded only to a limited extent, because society has always needed and still thinks it needs human robots. Utopian child-rearing will advance further necessarily only as society itself evolves out of authoritarianism. That is, as the accelerated changes now occurring propel us into the most rapid period of social evolution in all human history, we will then need citizens who are not robots, who are creative, who are not docile, who are innovative, who are not narrow-minded bigots, who are explorers in every sense of the word. Traditional child-rearing began to falter only when society began to enter into the present period of accelerated change and technological omni-transformation of traditional values. Failures in communication generally derive from sending a message to the wrong address. That is, your husband has an ego problem and you send a message to his mind. Adapting a diagram from transactional analysis, what has happened is this. The message is addressed from Circuit 1 to Circuit 4. It means, I feel weak, help bolster me up. If the answer comes back from Circuit 3 to Circuit 3, well, let's analyze the problem. There's been a wrong address. Of course, this example is deliberately untypical, although not impossible. It's untypical because women traditionally are trained not to make this kind of mistake, to be emotionally sensitive, to be supportive, etc. It is much more likely statistically that this kind of wrong address will go the other way, husband to wife. That is, the wife signals help and the husband on Circuit 3 says, let's analyze the problem. We have said that the imprinting of the circuits contains a large element of accident within genetic parameters. Society everywhere, without understanding this theory, understands enough pragmatically about imprinting processes to attempt to program each individual for his or her assigned role. Hence, traditional girl rearing is different from traditional boy rearing, so that women will have more Circuit 2 sensitivity. Again, women's liberation, like modern child rearing, arrived only when we were evolutionarily ready or nearly ready for it. The traditional system worked in traditional societies. Similarly, class structure, like the caste structure in an insect hive, works to produce the right imprints in each class. The third circuit of the servile class or proletariat is imprinted chiefly for manual dexterity, while the same circuit in the middle class or ruling class children is imprinted for verbal, mathematical, or other system symbol-using skills. Democracy has been less than a total success, and the intellectual's half-shamed cynicism about democracy is justified, to the extent that traditional society did not need, could not use, and in many ways discouraged the development of high verbal, rational skills in the majority of the population. That is, concretely, most people are not encouraged to be very smart, and are rather heavily programmed to be comparatively stupid. Such programming is what is needed to fit them into most traditional jobs. Their biosurvival circuitry works as well as that of most animals. Their emotional territorial circuitry is typically primate, and they have little third circuit mind to verbalize, rationalize with. Naturally, they usually vote for the charlatan who can activate primitive biosurvival fears and territorial patriotic pugnacity. The intellectual looks at the dismal results and continues to believe in democracy, only by an act of blind faith similar to the way beliefs in Catholicism or communism or snake worship are maintained. Again, the traditional system works for traditional society. A mass made of people who have intense curiosity about why Beethoven went in for string quartets after the Ninth Symphony, or whether Kant really refuted Hume satisfactorily, or what the latest quantum theories mean in relation to determinism and free will, is not a mass that will easily be led into dull, dehumanizing labor at traditional jobs. Why did Adlai Stevenson lose to Ike Eisenhower, George McGovern, and to Tricky Dicky Nixon, etc.? It was the wrong address problem again. Stevenson, McGovern, and other darlings of the intelligentsia were speaking to the Third Circuit, which is not very highly developed in most domesticated primates yet. Eisenhower in his fatherly way and Nixon in his bullying big brother way knew just how to push the right Second Circuit emotional territorial buttons to get a mob of primates to follow them. They were genetically programmed alpha males in ethological terms. Similarly, the moralist, i.e. the adult personality who has imprinted heavy ethical imperatives on Circuit 4, is often totally unable to communicate with the scientist or technologist. The moralist may even decide, many already have, that the scientist per se is inhuman. In fact, morals are fairly irrelevant to the Third Circuit analytical mind, which is a brain function the average scientist has imprinted most powerfully. To the Third Circuit, the only morality is accuracy. The only immorality is sloppy thinking. Again, the rise in social consciousness among scientists is happening only when it was evolutionary necessary that it happen, i.e. after Hiroshima. If it doesn't seem to be happening widely enough and quickly enough, well, the same can be said, also an error, I think, about modernizing education and child-rearing, about women's liberation, about racism, etc. The rebellion against all the follies of the past is succeeding, and will continue to succeed, only as we evolve into a society which needs each human to function well on all circuits. We're moving with ever-increasing speed into such a society. What the impatient radical forgets is that many of the injustices of the traditional primate society were not even perceived as such by the best minds of 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago, or in the case of institutionalized sexism, even 30 years ago. If we can see injustice and absurdity in many age-old institutions, it's only because we're evolving out of robothood, at precisely the point in evolution when it is necessary for us to become smarter and more sensitive on all circuits. Each of us has a favorite circuit, that is, a circuit that has been more heavily imprinted than the others. Miscommunication, misunderstanding, and general misjudgment of one another is vastly increased by the fact that few of us know about these levels of circuitry, and we all tend to assume that the person we're interacting with is on the same circuit we are. Thus, there are narcissistic first circuit types in every social group. Present them with a problem, and they will immediately look for somebody else to handle it, since the oral stage is robotically imprinted for dependency. Or if they have imprinted hostile weakness instead of dependent weakness, they will explode into anger, infantile tantrum, raging that a problem exists and that it has been imposed on them. A second circuit type in the same situation will attempt to frighten the problem away by barking and blustering at it, mammalian fashion. A third circuit type will try to reason out the problem. This is the best approach only with problems that are themselves rational, i.e. how do you make this machine work? It can be blind and futile when the problem is another human being acting out one of the more destructive second circuit rage problems. The liberal is the one who leaves the room when the fight starts, somebody once said. Third circuit types are most confused and feel impotent when second circuit mammalian politics takes over the scene. A fourth circuit type will try to be rational, third circuit, and to sense the emotional dimensions of the problem, second circuit, but will basically try to impose a moral solution. Now this is the decent, fair thing to do. This may or may not make sense to the third circuit rationalist, looking for objective justice, and it will usually make no sense at all to the totally second circuit type dominated by emotionalism and territoriality. What is true of the group is true of the individual. While we all have our favorite circuit and tend to see that the circuit as superior to all the others, we can be pushed out of it by shocks or stresses, in which case we jump to another circuit. The most robotic rationalist will descend to the first circuit eventually if a threat to biosecurity is forcibly enough presented on the screen of consciousness. And if prevented from leaving the room when the fight starts, the rationalist will even descend to second circuit mammalian howling and barking under sufficient pressure. Oliver Wendell Holmes referred to this as the hydrostatic principle in controversy, whereby the pools drag everybody down to their own level. The most robotic emotionalists may also move up to the Third Circuit temporarily if a problem remains intractable to every form of emotional bullying or con artistry. All of us will move into the Fourth Circuit parent role or superego. Even little children will do it imitatively if it seems that the only way to get what one wants is to appeal to tribal morality. Why it would be positively indecent not to do it the way grandfather would. Give us the child until he's 5 and we will have him for life, bragged some 18th century Jesuit. The Jesuit order of that time, as Aldous Huxley later noted sardonically, educated Voltaire, Diderot, and Marquis de Sade. Obviously, their techniques of brain programming were not perfect. Nonetheless, most people in most societies do grow up as fairly accurate replicas of the previous generation. Most children educated by the Jesuits have remained Catholics. Most children of Democrats do not become Republicans, etc. Considering the wide variety of philosophies available to any of us, nudism and Buddhism, scientific materialism and snake worship, communism and vegetarianism, subjective idealism and existentialism, Methodism and Shinto, etc., the fact that most people remain in the same reality tunnel as their parents does indicate that acculturalization is a mind control process. We're all giants raised by pygmies who have learned to walk with perpetual mental crouch. Unleashing our full stature, our total brain power, is what this book is about. There's a Zen story, very funny, haha, about a monk who, having failed to achieve enlightenment, brain change, through the normal Zen methods, was told by his teacher to think of nothing but an ox. Day after day, the monk thought of the ox, visualized the ox, meditated on the ox. Finally, one day the teacher came to the monk's cell and said, "Come out here, I want to talk to you." "I can't get out," the monk said. "My horns won't fit through the door." "I can't get out." At these words, the monk was enlightened. Never mind what enlightenment means right now. The monk went through some species of brain change, obviously. He developed the delusion that he was an ox, and awakening from that hypnoidal state, he saw through the mechanism of all other delusions and how they robotize us. Exercises. 1. Recreate vividly in imagination your first orgasm. To what extent do you still use the same accessories to turn you on? 2. Try to change your sexual imprint. See if you can reach orgasm by some method that has been taboo or unthinkable to you before. 3. Imagine you're Reverend Jerry Falwell. Explain to an imaginary homosexual why his sexual imprint is sinful and should be changed at once. Include instructions on how to change it. 4. Imagine that you're a gay man or lesbian. Explain to Reverend Falwell why you will not or cannot change your sexual imprint to please him. 5. Read Margaret Mead's Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies. Then write a 5-page proof that the taboos in our tribe make more sense objectively than the taboos of the tribe she studied. Be serious about it. 6. Choose the viewpoint of the Samoans in Dr. Mead's book above. Write a 5-page proof that their taboos make more sense than those of our society. Be serious about it. 7. Reread the paragraphs about the giraffe and the gosling. What does this tell you about your sexual imprint? What is your Jeep or your ping pong ball? Thus concludes Section 614 of Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. Chapter 8, The Moral Socio-Sexual Circuit. Tomorrow we will start with Chapter 615. Chapter 9, Mind Washing and Brain Programming. I will see you then. Alam.